Okay, seventh hub, let's get into it. So here we are. We have arrived at the final hub. For those of you who track the correlationist chakras, it's the seventh chakra, the crown chakra. And, but really importantly, so it's called the name of the hub. Each of the hub has its like name, in terms of its, it's like, the last one was C. Um, the fourth hub is connect. The third hub is do, action. So no, it's like, so what does no mean? Because no is actually going to seem like knowing, because one of the like largest holding patterns, interruptions, is absolute certainty. So it's like, what does it mean to know something? This hub is like very like it's kind of the like counterforce to the solidity of notions that are in, oh my gosh, I look tired, in the first hub. So in the seventh hub, knowing is actually something that is like felt, and we're going to talk a lot more about that as we get into this. But this is this is definitely not, like as we're coming into this, um this is definitely the place where, as I was reading the chapter header here, where you have the overview of what we're about to get into here, and I'm gonna talk through it, that to have your lower hubs handled, like to have them established. So specifically the first hub, in terms of the sense of having this like sensibility that's around like your trust in yourself, in your ability to feel physically secure. This cat is just a wild man. Oh my gosh, he's very funny. Um So let's see. So the trust in this, and this doesn't mean, so this is, I'm going to revisit this right now, which is that physical security is guaranteed for no one. And this is why death is one of the contemplations in the first hub, but it is about the reduction or the elimination of constant vigilance, like fixation on security, and the sense of being able to handle discomfort, B, being able to have trust in your ability to like the things will like arise and they'll ultimately be okay. So there isn't like the constant harbored low level anxiety of physical insecurity, which is an internal state of like cultivating that sense, because the practicality of it is always going to point out the fact that it's like, well, it's an unsafe world. It's there isn't guaranteed safety. The human right of having your needs met is not guaranteed. But um yeah. So it's to be able to establish some sensibility in that. And then the next is the emotional. So this is actually where a lot of folks, and this is something that's kind of like stuck in my craw today, as it relates to Parinama, is that the second hub, which is like being comforted, having feelings, like not being over flooded emotionally, overloaded, overwhelmed, that hub, that second hub, is where what I find is a lot of people are still working to get that need met, to have that kind of comfort. And and so, with Parinama is about doing the work. Parinama is about doing the work. It's about like instituting, not instituting. It's about this tangle and working at softening and changing and seeing these aspects of ourselves as malleable and working in that. And um and when we need comfort, when we're in the comfort cycle, is that we just keep being exposed with whatever capacity we have, whatever emotional capacity we have. We just keep getting exposed to the world, kind of like needing to be comforted by it, being exposed to the world, like needing to be comforted. And this is really about this is about shifting that cycle so there's greater capacity, greater tools, greater capability. Because one of the things I'm finding is that this need takes up so much airspace, um, that to actually do anything where you're like shifting uh, and making the moves that increase the capacity. Yeah, it's a little bit of a catch-22. And then also the sense of like personal power and individual autonomy. And then also, on top, the next on the fourth hub is the love of oneself, the cultivated sense of adoration for your own beingness. And that these things, if these are not established, these upper hubs wind up becoming almost like traps that, and we'll talk about this when we get into its chapter. I think it's in chapter 11 where we talk about the sort of like hub distributions, like upper dominant, lower dominant, like all the ways that sort of the strengths of the hubs get sort of balanced out. And and we're staying in our heads, which are these a lot of what can happen in these upper hubs, then it can be a holding pattern. Okay, so let's do it. My cat he's like very clingy right now, so he's laying down here next to me. So I'm gonna read right out of this. So we're on page 2, I think it's 244. If I could see under my cat, I would tell you, but I'm gonna just go for it. I'm gonna read. So the seventh hub, no, is knowledge and awe. I do feel like understanding should be in there somehow, but it's not. So onward. So the epigraph, whatever, the opener to the chapter is a quote by Carl Sagan, which is the nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, the carbon in our apple pies were made in the interiors of collapsing stars. We are made of star stuff. So the dense solidity of the first hub of the Parinama method so the first hub, is the complementary paradox to the lightness and the space that we explore here in the seventh hub. The first hub is where our feet meet the ground and we find consistency. And it is also where we have containment of physical boundary. Now, for the seventh hub, no. I discuss the seemingly limitless and even cosmic counterbalance along with the consciousness that makes transformation possible. Yeah, that's a key point, I think, in there, is that the lower hubs, the reclamation of them and the reformation of them is not possible without the upper hubs, right? So, yeah. Huh. I'm grouchy today. Grouchy. Remember that transformation involves change, and change isn't possible if our lower hubs consider it a security threat and reflexively block it from happening. But here I discuss a different kind of security, being part of something much larger than ourselves. Our relatively limited cognition makes comprehension of our cosmic origins something too immense to fully understand. But in the seventh hub, we try to, through contemplation and inquiry, wondering what part we play in the universe. If we're receptive, we may catch transcendent connection through the natural world, exposure to art, creation, love, and inspiration from the actions of other people. or simply through the inexplicable awe of what is sometimes described as grace. Yeah. We access the mystery and invite its wisdom through our curiosity, inquiry, and the creation of inner space, quiet, and stillness. The vast and profound communicate through subtle sensation. Yeah, that is so, that's good. You've probably felt it, perhaps in silent moments of peace, shared with family, and or in moments of sheer awe, experienced while in nature during the birth of a child. Your cat rolling into you. Or in an astonishing act of mercy or compassion. There is a transcendent peace when standing in a forest or having our feet in the sand while looking out on the ocean. The body's felt senses developed through each hub open us to the possibility of a direct relationship with the greater force that unifies the natural world through shared rhythms, cycles, and patterns. Knowledge, art, and wisdom conspire to support your process of knowing. Again, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. See chapter 2. When we open ourselves to knowing, serendipitous people, books, music, and numerous other signals keep pointing us towards the path, a convergence of forces in synchronicity that previously may have eluded our attention. Yeah, it was nice to read that. That was nice to read that. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to talk about what we can expect here and what we're going to explore. So, as you may or may not remember, is the way this is structured is there's 4 predominant functions in each of these hub explorations. One is learning the hub. So it's like, what is it? So when we're talking about the existence of a hub, it's like a containment of a specific facet of our identity, a specific facet of ourselves. And it's like, what is contained in it? So we look at first of all, the initial development of it as it relates to the nervous system. And then we look at the basics of kind of the sort of, I don't know, like almost like the atomic layer of it, like and then the themes, which are when they come together. It's kind of like the molecular. So it's like atomic, like the more simple and singular, and then it's sort of the slightly more complex. So that's learning what the hub is. And then we understand the interruptions and stressors, which are what are the things that impact the development of the hub and therefore impact our identity, this facet of our identity as a result of that. So I'm going to talk about how those are reflected in the 7th hub. And then we come to know the adaptations and holding patterns, which are, so we learn what the hub is. We understand how its development is impacted. And then we understand how that actually shows up in terms of like what our reality is formed as and our behaviors and the manifestation in our lives. And then we have the expansion and the dynamism of the hub itself with the techniques and exercises. So when we're talking about the 7th hub, this is young adulthood. So this is the last hub in the first sort of cycle of development. And this is about self-awareness. This hub is so the last hub is self-reflection. This is self-awareness. And the basics. So the timing of this would be like late high school into college. So the basics here, you've direct experience, consciousness and science, parallax, ambiguity, paradox, emblem, the witness, and hub identities. That one's a bop. Stay tuned for that one. That one gets a lot of, I don't know, It's a lot of appreciation and pointing out it's weird it's so far into the book, because it actually, I think it helps people even understand and conceptualize how all these hubs relate together. And then the themes, meaning and belief systems, inquiry, questions and answers, stillness and space, patterns and fractals, wonder and awe, sense of humor, and then amazing grace and a higher power. So that's learning what the hub is. And so interruptions and stressors. One thing, so actually I'll read these. So standards of purity and perfectionism in spiritual abuse, an interruption. Yeah. Rigid belief systems is an interruption. Censorship and suppression of curiosity is an interruption and stressor here. And I'm even noticing right now that since I wrote this, there were things that when I was writing this book that they'd kind of come through. I've talked a bit as we've been getting further into the end here about the process of writing it in terms of the creation as it relates to the book itself and also its creation, is that there were things that I would be like, oh, I don't know. No. I was really reluctant about. I was like, I don't want to, it just felt really controversial in a way that I wasn't comfortable with yet. And I actually think this is worth mentioning for like, because I'd want to hear this, which is that now I'm watching right now as this is becoming more and more topical. Like this is arising. People are talking about this stuff now. Just like 2-3 years ago when I was writing it, it was like not in the zeitgeist yet. So it was really an uncomfortable thing to say, like, I'm gonna write about this stuff in the third hub with power. A lot of stuff where I was like, oh, brutal. Actually, it's throughout the book. There's stuff where when it would be like conceptually downloading, I would be getting really nervous about it and uncomfortable. So, yep, here it is. Here it is now. So the adaptations and holding patterns. So, per usual, the characteristics of the balanced and out of balance seventh hub. Then we've got the shrinking and inflating. And then for the holding patterns, we've got assumptions, spiritual bypassing and denial. And then the shadow in this hub is absolute certainty. Yeah. And it's been helpful. I'll say that since, through this for me, one of the things that has really helped me is that knowledge, because whenever I become fixated or sort of like fanatical or like absolutely like there is no like this is the way, like, because there are things, that have to do with human dignity where it's like there is no, human rights where it's like there's just no two ways about this, as I'm certain about it. But instead of turning something into an oppositional force, which creates more division, it's realizing like that certainty creates certainty creates division. And part of this, and we'll get into it, which is that the antidote for that is having some curiosity about the so-called opposing force of this when it comes to people. Yeah. And the techniques and exercises. So there's inquiry. That one's, I think is great. Limiting beliefs, working with those. And then a lot of stuff we'll work with again in the next chapters that come after this, chapter 11 and 12. Stillness and silence. Take an awe walk. Meditation. Focus and concentration. And then charge and discharge. Yeah, this chapter is really good. Yeah, it was so this chapter is good. It was one of the challenges I'd had early on was really comprehending what the difference was between the 6th and the 7th hub, and it became very clear throughout this process what it is, and hopefully it'll become clear as we read through it. But, yeah, really happy that I sat down to read this. Yeah, one thought that came through too, and even when I was working on the chapter was, I laugh about this, like, sort of sanctimonious notion, like I've had in other readings and in my life and stuff, this very, like, sanctimonious notion of meditation, It's like people love this, like, intensity of it. It's like, that thing where they're like, there's some, famous monk said, if you can't find the time to meditate for 5 minutes, it means you should meditate for 20. Um, people, like, love it. They're like, "Oh, yeah, haha." Um, but, one of the things that I found is that and this is actually how asana, like the physical practice of yoga, is represented in the Yoga Sutras, the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is, like, they exist to, like, remove the physical noisiness out of your body, like the physical movement in yoga, and it's very it's like, I think there's only, like, 2 sutras out of, like, what, like, hundreds that address, the physical practice that we're familiar with in the West, and it's not to say it's not for naught because, like, in the West, we're so outside of our bodies that I think the practice of yoga adjusts appropriately for a Western body, but, um but understanding that in the, like, sort of in the context of TPM, that by working through a lot of in the self-actualization and, like, working through, the adaptation in each of the hubs, it clears out a path where a lot of this becomes a lot closer to being passive. Can feel these feeling like, you can feel the alivenedness of yourself, and we'll talk about the different levels of feeling that move from, like, kind of, like, gross, like, the physical body to, like, the more kind of sublime, subtle, and there's a tendency to I don't know, actually, I'm not gonna talk about that till we get to it, but the one thing I'll say is that, there's, like, such a strong attachment in, like, in yoga and a lot of new age stuff and even popular culture things about, just sitting in silence. And, it's kinda like being with yourself, and the thing where it's like, "Oh my gosh, I don't wanna hear what the voice has to say," like, and that's kind of it's like, all the you're like, "Oh, I have all the racing thoughts," and it's like, "Okay, fair enough," but then it's kinda like the fear of sort of being alone with yourself, and with parinama, as we're actually reconciling each of these hubs, we're reconciling that, and anything that you're afraid to be with about yourself is like an unreconciled adaptation. We talk about this all the time in this, which is that there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that these adaptations of shame or fear or anger or grief or envy, jealousy, whatever, like these things that we've done, these adaptations that we've taken on to adjust to the circumstances and experiences of our life, especially the early life, in many cases get named and shamed into being sort of, like it's like the inherent darkness of yourself. But when you're safe to love yourself, when you're safe in this internal space with yourself, meditation is just sort of passively enjoyable and it's sustainable for long periods of time. You don't have to put a timer on. You can just, like, sort of stay in it, which is like, I never would have believed that. I was never interested in it. I was always like, "Ooh," but it's kind of a passive outcome if you do this, if the reconciliations take place. So yeah, so the thing about like, trying to steer in through this, I don't know that I understand how that's possible. I mean, I think people do transcendental meditation and have some success with that, I guess, but whatever. I don't know whether it's possible or not. No rigid beliefs, right? Who knows? Okay, so let's see. Yeah, this one's really full of really wonderful things. Yeah, it's kind of nice to see it. It's kind of nice to look at it and just like, when I'm reading through those section headers, it's like delights me because I know what's coming, and I've been looking forward to the return to this, and I am very happy to share it with you, my beloved watcher. Yeah. So the next, was this like the introduction? Yeah. The next is orientation. And then we get into initial development and basics. One thing that's funny, just in terms of like the place that is like held in these for talking about the production of the book, is that even so, it's like looking at the beginning of this book where there's the table. Like these tables were one of the first things that I created. They're definitely not what this is. They're definitely not this version. But this kind of thing about trying to figure out how this fit together. It's not this, but it's just like the first real thing where I was like, how do these hubs like actually have like and it's funny that that's how it worked out. Like it's funny that they wound up being just a framing, like a table of contents for each chapter, or like yeah. I'm really happy with it. Also, I'm really happy with how they look. Sheila, the designer, I really like the paintbrush stroke and the colors, and I feel really lucky for that. But also the thing about like I don't know if anybody would ever notice this, but it's the thing about like the beginning of a chapter that there's like an opening. And then there's the orientation, which is like the bullets of like the physical location, the first cycle, timing, the task, rights, identity, reconciliation. Oh, this will be right there. And then there's like this other piece of writing that's like under orientation. So it's like there's an introduction and then there's the orientation. I don't know, maybe we'll figure out why it's different. But that was one of the things it was always like trying to keep the standardization in the chapters. And it's hard to keep in mind. I mean, one of the things, it's like you just look at the sheer mass of this thing. I don't even know if that comes across here. Yeah, that comes across. Keeping it all organized. Like that, the thing about like keeping it, like trying to keep it standardized. And that was like, oh my gosh, I'm just looking at how, where are we? Okay. Yeah. And so that wound up becoming kind of a challenge because it was like standardizing, because as I was working on it, it was evolving and changing and revealing itself to me. So there were things about, there's continuities and it's self-referential in a lot of places, which is just happens very passively as you're reading it, that it just works. But it's like, it's like me and my editor just were sweating it out all the time about making sure that we were making the correct pointing back, like see chapter such and such. But even the thing about in chapter 2, there's this whole, there's the whole notion of chapter 2 is that it's the like overlay to part 2. So that would continue to be an overlay as the chapters, as the understanding of the hub was evolving. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. I can't believe I did this. It's crazy. It's wild. It's really good though. I'm really happy to be here with this. Look, there it is. Okay. Hey, it's kind of like a note. It just occurred to me. I looked at the back of the book and I saw my name on it. Is that people have asked me, like, oh, your name on the book. And I really don't identify with it. I don't see my name on it. It's not, I don't have a thing where I look at this and I'm like, mine, I wrote this. I have a different relationship with it. I feel like humbled by the role I was granted to have in the creation of it. Because as we'll talk about, oh look, it's like this is like it really is a well-loved copy now, as it's been used for this entire exercise. Is one of the things I'm going to point back to this, which is that when we get into chapter 12, which is about like conscious creation, in a very practical way. I mean, I've used it to generate businesses that are making hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not just like new age, like your kind of, sort of typical new age fodder. And I'm looking forward to like actually refocusing on it. But one of the things about it is that in the order of operations for creation, limiting beliefs about what you're capable of, and it will be discussed in here, but limiting beliefs about what you're capable of, and even the things that you want to do. If you think like, well, I can't do that, I don't know how to do it, or I'm too old, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not this enough, and I'm not that enough. If there is that feeling of connection to it, the most important thing is finding that kind of kite, that feeling, like where it catches wind and it has that energy, and also cultivating that. So it won't just be passive in the beginning. You're gonna have to like actually cultivate some of that. But that if one of the things that like takes the wind out of your kite is the idea that it's like, well, I don't know how to, or I'm not good at that, or is to really point out that there are people that will come. If you start sort of like building the energy vortex, or like creating a space for it, I don't know how you describe it, but it's like creating the space for this, and like starting to like have it build its momentum and bring and sort of summon it into existence, and sort of listen to it and allow it to be, that people will come. And there was this inexplicable aspect of the creation of this book, which was that my editor, it's like, how on earth would my editor, I'd actually interviewed various editors, and it was also kind of like, well, how do you find one? Question one. And then once I started to get into that process of like asking people and talking about it, and and there was just, I don't even remember how that I do. But also seeing things I liked, and if I liked it, saying like, that's a thing, and then asking people about it and tracing that and saying like, because that's kind of part of what happens. My book designer, I saw a book and I like, the book wasn't really kind of like my kind of thing, but there was like a quality of the book that I really liked about like the feel of it. And I still actually, I don't know that I know exactly how to describe it, but then I'd asked, and then I got introduced to the designer who did Parinama. And it's extraordinary. So, one of the things, and even when you look at people like in popular culture that you see who are like sort of masthead people, where it's like Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whoever, it's like what they are is a magnet that draws in the best of the best to collaborate with them to make this. I mean, it's like Taylor Swift doesn't make her costumes. Taylor Swift doesn't create her stages. Taylor Swift doesn't choreograph her dances. Taylor Swift doesn't, like design her merch. Maybe she like, approves and stuff. And there's kind of a, and we'll get into this again in chapter 12. There's a thing about captaining, being the captain, but part of it is actually like in your project, that you are in your purpose and whatever it is, that if you start to create and have enough of a vision and allow the momentum to build and to figure out, like it starts to crystallize and you begin to articulate it, that you'll be able to communicate with people and say, this is what I'm working on. And the right people go, yeah, I want to be part of that, which is what happened. which is what happened here. I mean, I had everyone who worked on this book. It's kind of an interesting thing too. I'm going to put in another note here. Everyone who worked on the book was extraordinary, and it was like magnetic. It just drew in the best of the best people. And then there was another facet of the book, which was the marketing of it, which the same thing wasn't happening. And now I know, because now I look and I'm like, yeah, it wasn't supposed to really exist that way. It's not that. It just, and so it's fine that it kind of spent a little bit of time in that world, because whatever it's supposed to be will be revealed, and but it's very interesting, is the aspect of the launching of the book. It's nothing against the people. It just wasn't it just the synergy, it just didn't exist the same way. This sort of like effortless but efforted. Talk about like complementary opposite. Like, it was really hard work, but it was also had so much grace in it that we worked so hard. But it was like, just had this like kind of thing where it just kind of was in a jet stream. So anyhow, okay, well, I think I actually, I'm finding that I really want, like, this hub I'm really energized by talking about it, and I'm looking forward to getting further into it and talking about it some more and working on it. Sixth hub was rough for me. This is a lot of revelation, a lot of opening, a lot of expansion. I'm still in recovery from it. What a time in the world to be not looking away. But yeah, I'm really, so I will say, like, I'm really looking forward to this, going into the 7th hub here and doing this as a practice. And I'm also looking forward to the descending with the chapter 12. Chapter 11 will be good too. It's very practical. But for my own practice, especially as it relates to what comes next for this as a kind of like what this is. Like, I'm going to use my own, eat my own dog food. I'm going to use it to figure out like what is next for this. Because it's so far it's pretty magical. So I'm going to continue to invite in, the process. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sending you lots of love from here. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. And I guess, like I always close these out, if you have any comments, they're always welcome. Haven't been many comments lately, which is fine. But also, so one of the things I will say is that if this isn't certainly not the first time I'm saying this, is that if you do not have my direct, you don't have direct communication with me, at the Parinama Method on Instagram, you can reach out to me there. And if there's something you want to share that you don't really want to have like in a public comment forum, I totally understand. I'm very interested. I love hearing. Today I'm frustrated. Hey, listen, I'm not putting myself on a pedestal here. About this kind of thing, about like this differential between comfort and actually like doing the undertaking of doing this as like transformational work. But yeah, it'll pass. Comes, it goes. Okay. Oh, one of the other things is I don't answer. It has to be a question. It literally needs to be structured like a question for me to answer it too. That's one thing too that I'm not answering, is when people are saying da 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 question mark. It's like, that's not. Don't make me do the work. Ask me a question. I'll answer it. Ask me a question. I'll answer it. ask you to clarify the question. I'm not going to say, well, can you clarify? No, I'm willing to answer anything. So that's it. That's where it starts and it stops. Okay. Well, so sending you lots of love wherever and whenever you are. And I appreciate all interaction with this. I love to see, I will say, I do love to see any interaction. I love a like, I love a comment, and I love just that anyone is like any sense of connection. I'm deeply connected with anyone who feels the gravitational pull of this work. So, all right. So I'm sending you a lot of love, and I will see you next time. All right. Bye.